Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Chris Fechner, the Executive Officer for the Digital Transformation Agency. Chris has extensive experience in state government services, focusing on large-scale digital and ICT reform and transformation programs, as well as implementing contemporary investment, contestability, and governance frameworks. Before joining the Australian Public Service, Chris was the Queensland Government Chief Customer and Digital Officer throughout 2020 and 21. Chris was previously the Chief Digital and Product Officer at Service New South Wales. Chris holds an Executive Master's of Business Administration and a Bachelor of Applied Science and Computing, both from Queensland University of Technology. Chris is going to give us today an implementation update on government's data and digital strategy. Welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Pamenti. I'm going to wander a little bit to make me feel more comfortable so that I can see things as well. Thank you for inviting me here today. Chris Fechner, Chief Executive of the Digital Transformation Agency, but I also hold the role as the head of the digital profession, along with Dr. David Gruen, who is the head of the data profession, and all working under the Gordon DeBrow, who's the head of the professions in the space. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the data and digital government strategy and the reason why we believe it's so important, and give you a bit of an update on where we are in that particular space. So 10th anniversary is a really good thing to have here. It is really exciting to see how data has come into a specialty over time. When I first started at the start of my career, I was working in a IT shop. Then I became a CIO, and then I got like some of those other things, more services coming in, and there was funny names like Chief Digital and Product Officer, Chief Digital and Customer Officer. Now we've got Chief Data Officers, we've got, and we're going to have one, we've got a National Data Commissioner. So we're really seeing that although we have a common genesis in, let's face it, the introduction of the transistor that's caused a revolution in time that keeps accelerating, there is a need now for us to think about how data is used, how we collect it, how it's being applied, and how it's creating benefits for everybody. And as we see technologies continue to increase with the introduction of very high-level consumer-grade AI, like generative AI, we're seeing just how important and how risky gaps in our understanding of data can be. So the data and digital government strategy is an attempt to do a couple of things, and I'm going to keep it really simple. This first image, by the way, was a generative AI image. I'm sure everyone's had a crack at it at the moment. And it was just about how do you actually bring together the aspects of data and digital in a way that's representative of Australia. So that was the prompt, pretty much, that I used in that particular one. And it came out with something that had the Sydney Opera House, pretty iconic, but it also had some of those aspects of linking things together. And I think that top circle is actually a really bad representation of the Southern Cross. It is possible that hallucinations still exist, right? So it's very good. At least there's no detached arms on this one. So the idea of the data and digital government strategy is that it's going to create a collective vision for us. And it's really about some of the things that Minister Dibb really talked about. Simple, secure and connected public services for all people and all businesses through world-class data and digital capability. Now, you don't need to take photos of that. You can go to dataanddigital.gov.au and actually download the PDF version of it. You can see all of the aspects that I'm talking about today. And it'll be one of those things that is a living and breathing strategy. So the intent of this particular one is that it's very significant in that it has a strategy, it sets some directions, and it identifies some measures. And I'm going to talk about all of those today. But it also understands how rapidly data and digital are changing and that we're going to have to adapt to how we respond to these things to make it work for us. So today, I'm going to do something a little bit different than our strategy because it seemed very clever to say that the data and digital government strategy is as easy as 1, 2, 3, 4. And the reason I've done that is there is the rest of the slides that come through, and you'll see it as we go through. But the first part is, like the Lord of the Rings, there is one strategy that's being created to bind data and digital together. Now, this is the very first time that data and digital strategies for government have been put together. And we know that that's really important because of the obvious connections between data and digital. Minister Dibb mentioned a coin. Data and digital are two sides of the same coin. And if we concentrate on them too much individually without understanding how they connect, how they support each other, data is the lifeblood of digital services or digital capabilities, and digital is the skeleton structure that ensures that all of those things can actually move around the system to achieve their outputs and goals. So having this together for the first time was not a trivial activity. We consulted quite broadly across the public service. We engaged with industry. We talked to communities. We talked to academia. All of them thought it was a really good idea to put them together because we have, through specialty, created opportunities for fragmentation as well. We collect data that sits in silos. We have services that hold the data inside those systems and never release them. So the opportunities that we opened up through our combination of data and digital strategy really means that we have the opportunity to expand the benefits to people and businesses, as we talked about before. So the synergies that we've got, how we actually leverage the value of data in delivery of services, how we know how to fine-tune our services, how we actually know where to target those services, where those services aren't working, how we can create better policy informed by data, and how we can actually create better productivity inside of our environments through systems application that free up more time for humans to deliver the absolute highest quality services that we can do. And we've been actually able to do a couple of things, and I say quite proudly that in the recent OECD Digital Government Maturity Index, that Australia came 5th. And 5th is actually a pretty good position for us. It was behind a couple of European countries, the UK, and one of the things that I was most proud about is everybody looks to America as the stalwart of digital. They were way down the list. And the one that I always like to focus on as well is, in terms of our maturity, we were actually one above Estonia. Now, who has heard Estonia demonstrated as the world's best digital and data place ever? Yeah, they are very good at their marketing, and they are also very good at their delivery of services. So to be put in the same category as that is really a very good start for us, and it is just a start. So it is important that what we do in our strategy builds us from this platform, that we continue to grow in that particular space. So I'm going to check my watch too to make sure I don't talk for too long. But the 1, 2, 3, 4 is this particular thing. One strategy to bind us. We have 2 enabling missions, and Minister Dibb talked about this as well. We have to have trust and security in government. It is those aspects that is the social licence for government to operate in society, that we collect data for the purposes of delivering amenity to society, and as we collect that data, our responsibilities are to manage it effectively. So we connect these things. So we cannot have data inventories without system securities. We cannot have systems that create and manage data without having some sort of design principles inside those systems that secure them. We know that trust is very, very tightly linked to service delivery capabilities. One of those things that's absolutely true. The better the services the government delivers, the more that government is trusted. And that only occurs up until something bad happens. So there's really good evidence that talks about it takes many more positive experiences with quality of service delivery to recover from one bad experience. And we see that with things like those telcos that unfortunately had that security breach. But we're also looking at, in this particular enabling missions, that the government's role has become, by de facto, a data collector. Government is one of the most populous sources of data that holds benefit to everyone. And we've got things that are as the open data, which is, the data.gov.au. We have Geosciences Australia with their spatial data and the imminent release of the Atlas into production, which is very exciting. We also have aspects of things that we create in all of our systems. And we're starting to share data quite a lot. So using data to drive decision makings, data-driven decisions, is a key to making sure that with the great power that we've got through that data, that we're making the right decisions to support them. So one strategy, two enabling missions. Now, I say I've taken license on this because in the strategy it puts these round the other way, but it didn't work for my counting. What we want to be able to do is see what we can get. I'm an old IT nerd, and I remember when I was very early in my career, we actually used to have to use printers to make them align text to particular parts of the page. And it was called WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And is anyone old enough to remember WYSIWYG? Yeah, good, thank you. It makes me feel better when I say that. The aspect of being able to see the impact of the data and digital strategy was a very important concept to it. We needed to be able to look at that. So these three areas of visible change, this is number 3. These are the 3 missions that we believe that have to be seen to be believed and have to be measured to demonstrate their performance. So delivering for all people and businesses is really the way that we're offering to use data, offering to create services, offering to improve capabilities and connections with communities for all areas. So it's not just the ACT, it's not just the states and territories, it's everywhere across Australia, it's all groups. Minister Dibb talked about inclusion. We're talking very much and I'll talk a little bit more about one of the initiatives in the strategy that's about inclusion. Simple and seamless services. It seems very easy to say, but it is very difficult to do. Governments have evolved into complex structures. They've evolved into multiple tiers. They've evolved into complex structures even within inside those things. So the ability for us to find, connect, make consistent is really difficult. So the data and digital government strategy has this goal of figuring out how we best deliver, but more importantly, how we measure the impact of that delivery to make sure that everybody gets what they're entitled to and that it's simple and easy to do, no matter whether they want to use the digital channel or not. And the last one, government for the future. Many of us still use paper. As head of the DTA, I try and never ever carry a pen and paper. I always try and carry an electronic device. Everything I try and do goes into digital and is saved as data. But we are still very heavily leveraged to older technologies. And with the advent of generative AI and its, I suppose, bullying tactic of getting involved in almost everything that government does, it's exposing a lot of weaknesses in where we've come so far. So we might be 5th, but we are still doing many things that we were doing before the turn of the century, the same way. Now, we've started to see more and more of that shift, and let's face it, COVID moved government forward probably 10, 15, even 20 years through that mandatory action of being able to work remotely. So What we also want to see in the strategy is how do we transform the Australian public service so that it works to the greatest effect to make sure that our people and our functions can be delivered to the best possible value. So here's WYSIWYG. We want to use data and digital in new and innovative ways. One of the things we're doing right now is we're running a whole of government trial on Microsoft's Copilot, the use of generative AI in terms of our productivity areas. So we're seeing how it creates content and drafts to help us make things start easier. It summarises our meetings. It rewrites our language to meet particular audience things. It does language transcriptions and interpretation. It even tells sentiment. I was in a meeting the other day and I came out and I thought, I'm not really sure how that went. And I asked Copilot what was the sentiment of the people in the meeting. And it said the same thing. So we're seeing the opportunity for growth in our environment to really bring us forward. We're seeing opportunities to improve the speed at which we can answer queries for our citizens through things like using trained AI models on providing advice on what's applicable in social services or what the impact of a particular change in legislation might be based on good data coming from our systems being put into tools that protect that information but can actually ingest it, interpret it, and provide a response in a way that's easily consumable. AI used to be one of those things that was only in the reach of experts. It's now in the reach of everybody, and its costs are low, barriers to entry are negligible. Next one is the outward-facing changes. So how do we utilise data? And we have great holdings, and I think Gail Milne's going to come and talk a bit later on about the National Data Commissioner and the role in collecting and sharing data. And I think Pia Andrews is going to talk from Home Affairs as the Chief Data Officer there about how they're using it in their quite complex environments. So we're seeing how do we do it? How do we make sure that the data sets that we're holding are fit for purpose for what we want to use them for, how they're used ethically and responsibly, and how they actually continue to grow. Sharing of data is still really hard in the Commonwealth, and I'll talk about one project in a minute. Now, number 4. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. Essential enablers. People. There is great deficits, and I'm always happy when I'm having this conversation with David about the number of data graduates. He tells me it's about 1,000 this year. We've got about 600 in the digital space, so he wins. But it's great to see that growth. But 1 in 5 jobs in data and digital roles are not being filled. The skills we need to change are not changing fast enough to meet the contemporary needs of government. So we've got to really focus on developing the skills, transitioning people, getting literacy, fluency and professionalism in the data skills up and running. One of our initiatives is a digital careers plan, and we're going to work in that. The other enables cybersecurity. We cannot disconnect. So I always think about cybersecurity as the bit that connects to the internet. But everything before that, the way we develop programs, the way we store data, the way we connect those things to the internet creates new opportunities, but also danger. We have a legacy environment where probably half of our critical systems for government were created before the prevalence of the internet. They're still in use, and they're plumbed into the internet now. So that creates great danger. So connecting cybersecurity and linking it to the government strategy on cybersecurity is important. Leadership, strategy and accountability through governance. We have to make sure that all of our people that are making decisions about data, making decisions about our investments in digital, have an understanding of the depth and the impact of those things. And we see that lastly in the investments. How do we ensure that we have the right innovation and collaboration? The DTA's role is actually to help advise government on what investments they should make over time and how do we actually start to assess them. The Department of Finance adds to that through looking at significant data impacts. And the Department of Home Affairs adds to that in terms of what are the cyber impacts associated with large investments. If we make the right investments, then we continue to have the social licence. We continue to move further along in our data maturity. I'm hoping at the next OECD one that we could be number one. Now, I will say, and sorry if there's anyone from the Department of Finance here, that the data aspect of the OECD Digital Government Index is our lowest area of scores. And it is about those things about, are we sharing enough? Are we making enough new data sets available? Have we got those data sets fixed? And we need to, as Minister Dibb said, we need to focus on that Kaizen thing about focusing on those things that can lift us further. If we lift those things, then we will continue to improve the services that we deliver. We will continue to grow in the ability for us to bring together all of those synergistic powers of data, digital and cyber so that we can deliver more to everyone, but we can do it at scale. One of the things I talked about was how simple and seamless is not particularly easy. One of the areas that we've really focused on is how do we know? What does good mean? How do we compare a service that's delivered through MyGov to a service that's delivered through ATO, for instance? Or how do we do this in the business sense versus the individual sense? Or even, how do we actually gauge the quality of the internal services that we receive as public service? Who has actually inside one of your own systems ever had a bad experience? Anyone? No, all systems work perfectly. Excellent. I'll let SAP know that next time I talk to them. So Digital Service Standard is one of those things that really helps us to think about measuring. Every one of those aspects that are in the Digital Service Standard has data attributes that say bad, better, good, best. So we're starting to measure those things, and we collect that data. We do an annual wave statement every year that sort of looks at how we're collecting it, but what we're going to do now is push even further, collect data directly from the source at the time of the service. We've got lots of data initiatives at the moment. Bringing them forward, there is a couple of key ones that I really wanted to call out was the data ethics framework from the Commonwealth. More power, more responsibility to use it effectively. We've had AI ethics since 2019. The data ethics go in front of it. Data maturity assessments. Do all the people that hold the data have all the tools and capabilities to responsibly manage it? And our view is that we've still got lots to do in that space. And even things like the Australian National Data Infrastructure, ANDI, and its role in supporting the delivery of better outcomes to people with disabilities through the National Disability Data Asset. If we get all these things right, if we get those collections of those datas in there, so they're both initiatives, or they're all initiatives in the strategy. If we get them right, they offer great opportunities to improve the lives of Australia's most vulnerable people. If we get them wrong, we can do permanent harm. So that's why it's so important that we look over the top of these things. And finally, I think I'm getting towards the end, we've got to talk about where the measures come from. Everybody who is great at data knows that you don't look at data without understanding it. Its quality, its attributes, its completeness, how it can be used, its scale. I had an experience once where I was working and they were using spatial data and people were trying to make an inference off that data at 10,000 metres when really the content was only applicable at 100 metres. And when you aggregate or you shrink or you make those determinations, you can really make bad decisions. And things like generative AI have great power. They're amplifiers. they can make you make really good decisions quickly, but they can also make you make really bad decisions quickly. So we've got to start measuring in these particular things so that we're going in the right direction. And changing in response to that is important. 1998, we developed, was the launch of Google Search. 2008 was the introduction of the iPhone. 2021 was ChatGPT. We're seeing massive changes in powers that really dynamically change the things that we're doing. So measuring these things is important. And I've put a couple of things in there. We're looking at baselines. So as of 2023, through Edelman Trust, 61% of people trusted government. That went down about 5 points from the height of COVID, by the way. So that shows that link between service delivery from government and trust in those things. How do we look at those things? Do we have the right people? 10% of current APS workforce are in data and digital jobs from last year. More and more we're going to see that as a prerequisite to do most jobs, whether it's a policy job, whether it's a service delivery job. We need to get the right skills, maybe not quals, but skills. I'm also looking at how do we keep doing this again? What is the next thing we have to do? So one of the most recent responses is when the strategy came out, Gen AI and ChatGPT was just at the edge. We've now got an AI task force that's part of that particular acting. It's made up of people that are looking at what's the impact of using government data in these things? How do we then apply it safely and responsibly into the delivery of public services or the creation of new content that we use in policy or productivity in terms of our own place? It is something that we're going to continue to work on, and we do consult on every year. There'll be annual scorecards put forward for this, and it will be one of the things that helps us measure the difference that we've got each year and drive those points of where are we doing well versus where do we need to place our effort, because we are also in a time where there are competing investments for data and digital, as you've heard in other circumstances. So making the right ones will maximise the positive benefits. Making the wrong ones, and we have made a couple of wrong ones in the last few years, will actually break that cycle of trust and confidence in that space. So thank you. I hope that was a bit of an input on those things, and I'm happy for maybe a couple of questions if people want them.
Maybe one question.
Okay.
Chris? Thank you. Anyone? Anyone has a burning question for Chris?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Come on over.
there you go. Let's have that. And for the others, please know Chris is going to be with us a little while. You're more than welcome to grab Chris during your break and ask him any other questions.
Right. Thank you, Chris. My name's Christy Van Putnam, ACT Government, and I lead the data team in one of the directorates. But we're also gathering, I love the fact that data and digital are together, but what about records? Where does that come into this? I guess we have a triangle going on. Where do you see that?
So I've always been of the view, that information management is the broad context and includes records. There's been a lot of work, I think, from people like National Archives at the moment on how do we actually ensure that the explosion of information still has the quality of capture of making sure that we're accountable through records on the decisions that government's made. Now, I think that it is true to say that as things have moved very much into things that don't sit outside classification schemes and the like, that the general process has fallen into retain everything and retain it permanently and then think about it once you run out of storage. So I think that there is a lot of work to do. I believe that things like artificial intelligence are going to have a much better impact on us. We saw with the explosion of search engines that were more about the context and the particular target words, that we could find things in flat structures without the hierarchies of business classification schemes. But I do believe that we're going to have to repurpose ourselves, because holding everything, as we know, is a really bad thing. Things that are facilitative shouldn't be kept, but things that are important that hold us in our decisions do need to be kept. And I do think that we'll focus more on how do we lift the standards of contemporary record keeping, about keeping what's important for the right amount of time to evidence the decisions of government. But I think it's going to be a technology shift rather than, you know, a reversion back to older sort of views about paper-based structures, file markings and the like.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, please join me in thanking Chris for a
Thanks, Karen. Thank you.
great speech. And
I am going to go for a bit, but I will be back, I think, with that.